were to come to you and say, can you introduce me to your family? Who would you introduce me to? Jesus asks a very similar question in Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12 and verse 47 beginning, it says, while he was still speaking to the people, behold, his mother and his brother stood outside, asking to speak to him. But he replied to the man who was with him, who is my mother, and who are my brothers? And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Now picture what's happening here. Jesus is busy teaching. He is interrupted by someone who comes and says, hey, Jesus, your mom and your brothers are outside and they want to talk to you. Now, we don't know what they wanted. It doesn't tell us. They may have wanted to say, hey, you haven't come by for dinner in quite a while. Can you stop in? Or hey, can you take mom for a few days? We don't know what it was. We don't know why they wanted to speak to him, but they wanted to. They interrupt his teaching. And so Jesus asks this question, not for really any other reason but to teach a principle. And he says, well, exactly who is my family? My family are those who do the will of my Father in heaven. This morning we are going to talk about family. And this is a subject that I am pretty passionate about. I consider myself to be a family man, both in my household and in this family. The reality is I love family, and I love this family. I love this family that meets in this place. And so this morning, I want us to kind of have a family reunion of sorts. Brenda and I, we haven't been able to do this in several years, but we've always enjoyed going on cruises. We've went on a few over the years. And I have yet to be on a cruise where when you get on, you see at least one group of people that are all wearing the same t-shirt, right? And typically that t-shirt has got the picture of somebody on it or something, and it's so-and-so's family reunion. And you've got all these people who've come on this cruise. Some of them haven't seen each other for years, and they're so excited to be on the cruise, but they're even more excited to be together because they're family. And so they're there together, and they're reminiscing, and they're interacting with one another because they are family. Well, this morning I want us to focus on family. But I want to do that by asking several questions, and the first one that I want us to consider this morning is, exactly who is my family? Who is my family? As we mentioned, Jesus answers this in verse 20 of Matthew 12, where he says, whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my family. Those who serve God, they are my family. You see, whoever does God's will is my brother, my sister, my mother. Now we know, according to 1 John 1 and verse 7, we looked at this last week, that if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have what? Fellowship with one another. And so if we are in the light of Christ, we are in fellowship with one another. And then according to Acts 2 and verse 47, those who are in the light of Christ are those who have been saved and added to the church. And so those who are in a saved condition, who have been baptized for the remission of their sins and have been added to the church, we are in the light, we are in fellowship, and therefore we are family. We're family. Each week We rub shoulders with people that we may have barely noticed. We come in as a large group of people. I don't get to speak to everyone. I try each week. I try to go around in between Bible class and worship, and you see me making rounds up and down the aisles trying to catch everyone. I don't manage to do it. So then I go and I stand out in the foyer, and I try to catch people coming out. But we have a side door. People can get out. But as hard as I try, I don't manage to speak to everyone. None of us here are probably successful in doing that. But the reality is, whether I speak to you today or not, if we share a birth in Jesus Christ, we are dearest relatives. We're family. Whether we get to speak to each other every time we gather together or not, we are family. How precious is the family of God? We all have our earthly families, and they're important. Our earthly families matter, and I do not want to send a message today to try to diminish that. Our earthly families matter. Brenda and I lost our youngest son just over 5 years ago, and we've spent the last 2 years trying to save another. We understand the pain and the struggle that we go through for our earthly families. We love our earthly families. But that pales in comparison to the love that we should have for the family of God. We are family, and that's special. What separates us here from everybody else in Citrus County or whatever other county you may be driving in from? We are family. And every Sunday, we come together for a family reunion. Even though we're functioning out as a family during the week, we gather together, and I believe that is one reason why God has established worship in the way that He has, is He wants us to come together as a body and reunite and reaffirm our love for Him and our love for one another. That's one reason why this idea of online church has been such a detriment to the cause of Christ and to the church. Anyone who thinks that they can affect the same relationship watching a sermon online as they can being together with the family of God, they've missed the point. It's about family. And I can't assemble with my family when I'm sitting in my pajamas drinking a cup of coffee watching a sermon. It is about coming together as a family of God. And so who is my family? Yes, we have our earthly families. But above all, you are my family. And I am yours. Well, that leads us to another question, and that is, what about my earthly family? What about my earthly family, especially those who are outside of the family of God? What role, what do I play with them? What does that mean? And, I want to be very careful here because this is a tough subject, and it is one that hits very close to home for all of us. But I simply want to let the Bible speak here because Jesus addresses this in Matthew 10, verses 37 and 38. Matthew 10, beginning in verse 37, he says, "Whoever loves the father, who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me." Now, is Jesus saying here that our earthly families don't matter? Absolutely not. What Jesus is saying, though, is that for the Christian, our first priority must be the family of God. It must be the family of God. It's very similar to the way God established the earthly family and how it is to function. We've kind of gotten it out of kilter today. In today's society, for most parents, if they have children, their number one priority above all is their children, and their spouse is number two. But is that actually how God established it to function? No. He established it to be the opposite. God established families to function where my priority, as I'm married to Brenda, my number one priority is my wife. Does that mean I don't love my children? No, I love my children dearly. But she's my number one priority. And then they come behind that. In our relationship with God, this family is to be my number one priority, and then my earthly family. Now, is that a struggle for us? Absolutely it is, because that's contrary to what the world tells us. It's contrary to what we see in the world and what we hear constantly pushed toward us. And yet, that's what God desires for his people. And so, understanding who our family is and understanding what role our earthly family plays, the third question I want us to consider this morning is, in what does a functional church family look like? What are we supposed to look like? I mean, we all know what dysfunctional families look like. We get that picture. We struggle understanding what a functional family looks like. So even within the family of God, what does that look like? Well, it looks like a white, middle-class country club group of people coming together on Sunday mornings, right? Is that what a functional body looks like? Some people would have you to believe that. The world would have you to believe that. But that's not what God has established his family to be. We see a picture of a functional church family in Acts chapter 2. Now in Acts chapter 2, beginning in verse 42, we have to set the scene here and understand this was the very beginning of the church. The church has just been established on the day of Pentecost. It was only in Jerusalem at this point, and there had been a lot of people who had come from other places to come to Jerusalem for Pentecost. They heard the gospel message. They responded to it. They were baptized for the washing away of their sins. They were added to the Lord's church, and so they stayed in Jerusalem for quite some time to continue to grow together as a body of believers and to grow in the Lord. And so the picture of this family was a little different than what we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the church today. And yet, look at what takes place. It says, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. And so here we have laid out basically the framework of what it looks like to be a functional church family. Again, the situations were somewhat different, but there are things that we see here that we should see in every church family. Number one, we study the Word together and we devote ourselves to applying it to our lives. Number two, we fellowship with one another, and we work to catch each other on fire for Jesus Christ. We share meals together, we pray together, we meet one another's needs, we worship together, and we have all things in common. That's the church. That is a picture of our family. And so this morning I want us to close with one final question. And the lesson is brief today. I didn't intend for it to go a long time this morning, because I just want us to really look at and consider this point of who is our family. And so the final question this morning is, what can we do to make this family what God wants it to be? What can we do? The reality is we are blessed as a family here in many, many ways, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And yet, we need to continue to work to be the church that God has called us to be. And so what are some practical things that the body of believers that meets here at Pleasant Grove Road can do to be what God has called us to be? The first one is this, and we see this in what we've already considered this morning, and that is we need to put Christ first in this family. You know, I have, over the years, seen a lot of congregations that have gotten so caught up in the functioning of church that they've lost sight of the purpose of it. You know, they get so caught up in being big or in growing or having programs and activities or being busy, all these different things, that they get so caught up in those things that they lose the why of it all. The why of it all is Jesus Christ. And he needs to be the focus of everything that we do. If we want to be the people that God has called us to be in this place, Christ needs to be the center of every step we take. I think one of the things we fail to do as a body, not only here, but I've seen this throughout the church, is to really ask ourselves, when we do plan programs and activities, what is our focus? Who is our focus? Sometimes we plan activities just for the sake of planning activities, you know? We plan things just for the sake of being busy. What is our focus and purpose in doing that? How many of you like busy work? How many of you like very busy work? Just work that's for the sake of being busy for no purpose, right? It's just busy, you know? It has no purpose in it whatsoever. It's just busy work for the sake of doing. Well, you know, when I was in school, I could not stand busy work. And I had teachers who thought that they had to have homework, send homework with us every night. And so I had a math teacher that if she didn't have math work for us to do, she would send crossword puzzles home for us to work. That had absolutely nothing to do with math, but we just had to do them for the sake of being busy. And guess what I asked every time I had to do one of those stupid crossword puzzles for math class? What is the purpose? Right? What is the purpose? Sometimes, if we're not careful in the church, we can get so caught up in thinking that we have to have stuff. You know, I've heard it here sometimes. I've heard people say, well, you know, the bulletin's kind of empty. We don't have anything going on. You know, well, we got to have something going on. Well, what should we have going on? And I've asked people, and they've said, well, why don't we have anything going on? I say, what do you suggest? Well, what are we supposed to be doing now? You know, what are we supposed to be doing? Folks, what are we supposed to be doing? Serving Jesus Christ. That may not always look busy, but our purpose should always be serving him. And everything that we do should be functioning within that purpose of Christ being the center of this family, of who we are. Which leads us to the second point, and that is that not only do we need to put Christ first in this family, we need to put this family first in our daily lives. And this is where it gets difficult. This is the challenge. And this is where people say, okay, Bill, now you're meddling. But the reality is that we get so caught up in the busyness of life, doing a lot of good stuff, But we get so caught up in the busyness of life that if we're not careful, we lose sight of our priority, which is not just Christ, but also his church, his family. You know, if y'all don't know this already, I'm pretty much here every time the doors are open. Now, yes, that's part of my role as the minister or the preacher here, but I don't miss a lot. Unless I'm out of town, I don't miss a lot of stuff. I'm here for most activities. I'm here for Bible studies. I'm here for worship. I'm here for all of these things. And I will tell you that when you are not here, I miss you. I miss you. When you're not here for worship, I miss you. The first thing I did this morning is looked around to see who was not here. When you're not here for Bible study, I miss you. When you're not here for activities and things that we're doing within the work here, I miss you. But I'll let you in on another secret. I'm not the only one who misses you. Why? Because we are family. And we need to be together. You know, my family, my earthly family, has a tradition every year of gathering together for Thanksgiving at my parents' house in North Carolina. And that's the one time a year I get to see my nieces and nephews and my sisters and their husbands. We all come together for that time together. But for the last 2 years, because of circumstances that Brenda and I are dealing with on our family here, we've not been able to be there. And my family has talked every year about how hard it is, that everybody else is there, but I'm not there. Brenda's not there because we are family. Should it be any different in the family of God? Should it be any different in this body? Shouldn't we have that same feeling when we look around on our family reunion day on Sunday when we come together? We look around and we see that there are members of our body who have made the choice not to be here. Shouldn't we have that same hurt and that same pain and that same longing for one another? You see, we need to be putting Christ first, but also this family first in our daily lives. Which leads me to the final thing this morning that we need to do, and that is we need to love this family. Folks, we are blessed. We're blessed. I've served in ministry for some 35 years at this point. I've worked with several congregations. I've served under several elderships. And these 3 men that serve as our shepherds are God's men. And we are blessed. They are not perfect. I could probably come up with a list of things. Not for Doug. Doug's pretty close, but the other 2, you know. They are not perfect. They've made mistakes, and they could tell you some of them that they've made. But these 3 men love God, and they love this church more than any eldership I've ever worked with. And we are blessed. We have 3 deacons who serve in different roles, and they are busy in those roles. I've, again, served with a number of deacons over the years, and these men know their roles. They work diligently within them. We need more deacons. We've actually been talking about that need because we have more work to do, but we are blessed to have these men serving in these roles. We have some amazing women who are serving in so many different capacities within this congregation. Some roles that you're aware of, others that you may not be aware of. But we've got women who are workers within this body doing amazing things for the cause of Christ. We have so many other members that are just doing all kinds of things, and we are blessed. We are blessed with unity and peace, and we are going the same direction with a common goal and a common purpose. We are blessed as a family. And folks, we need to be loving this church. You know, everywhere I've gone, every congregation I've ever worked with, you always have the complainers, right? You always have the complainers that in their mind the church is never what it should be. And we have that here too. You know, you have that wherever you go. But the reality is we're not where we should be. But more than any congregation I've ever worked with, this is a congregation who very much wants to be where God wants us to be. And we're working towards it. And we're doing it together as a family. And we are blessed. And so our call today is to put Christ first in this family, to put this family first in our daily lives, and to love the family of God that meets in this place. We are blessed to be together. And I know this is a radical concept today because the culture has changed and religion has changed. And we live in a culture today where church is something that we do rather than being who we are. And we are told constantly in our lives, church is what you do. It's just another function. It's just another activity. It's just another notch in your daily schedule, another check mark in your daily functioning. But you see, God has not changed. The church has not changed. And so, while this may be radical within the world's concepts, it's really not radical. You know, I'm not calling on you today to sell your house and to move onto the church property. We do have a shower here. We could probably make it work. But that's not the call this morning. That's not our purpose. But I am calling on you to love this family and to make it a priority of your life. Because you see, then and only then will we be the church that God has called us to be. We're going to be singing a song of encouragement in just a moment. And this song, its purpose is to give us time to reflect, to consider our relationship with God. And this morning, if you have not been baptized for the washing away of your sins, the reality is the scriptures tell us plainly, you are not yet part of the family of God. It is not enough to just say that you love God. You must come into relationship with that love through active obedience. And this morning, if you haven't done that, why not? There's no greater opportunity than to take that step today, to begin walking with and being a part of this family of God. You're not added, when you give your life to Christ, you're not added to the PGR family. You're added to the family of God, universal and eternal. But then by default, you also become part of the family that meets here. Why not take that step today? If you are a Christian, perhaps you recognize that you have lost sight of making Christ and his church the priority of your life. Why not fix that today? If we can help you in any way, we invite you to come as we stand together and as we sing.